Welcome back to another episode. Today we're going to take a closer look at two fan favorite semiconductor companies. The first one is going to be AMD. The second one is going to be Intel. Both these companies rely in the CPU market right now, and both of these are battling out for the server CPU market. So in today's episode, I want to take a closer look at some recent products that they just announced and kind of share my overall thoughts. I do want to say I'm actually a bit shocked of what something AMD did, and it's not the first time they did it. So I definitely want to hear from you, the viewers. What are your thoughts on how AMD is acting in the past few quarters? So let's take a closer look in today's episode.
I want to thank the Motley Fool for sponsoring this video, and check out fool.com/Jose for the 10 best stocks to buy now. With that link, you get a promotional offer for the subscription service. Now, let's continue with today's episode.
All right, so we're going to start off with AMD. The stock is sitting at $159. It's definitely been an interesting time. Year to date, the stock is only up 15% from its year to date high. The stock is down roughly 25%, right? This is a stock that was sitting at $210. And if you have been watching the channel, I did get a lot of hate when the stock kept climbing and climbing, and I found this a little bit overvalued. One of the reasons is, even though I do believe this company has a growth opportunity in things like AI, there was a lot of things that were unknown. Now, I want to say my tone and valuation has changed. I do believe AMD is sitting at a lot more attractive price, especially thanks to the AI accelerator market. But I took a closer look at their AI accelerator market a few days ago. I'll post a link maybe somewhere here or down there if you want to check it out, of all the AI solutions AMD announced. But because of that, I do believe AMD is sitting at maybe somewhat attractive prices right now. So let's start off with what AMD announced. So during their Computex 2024, they previewed their 5th generation AMD EPYC server CPU. And for those that are not familiar, EPYC is the CPU that goes into the data center market. And they've announced this before, but now they shared more data and previewed more kind of numbers compared to maybe its previous generation and its competitors. So they mentioned that this is the world's best data center CPU and is going to be available in the second half of 2024. One great thing about it, and let me see if I have it. Nope, I don't have it. One great thing about this 5th generation AMD EPYC CPU is the socket, or pretty much like the pins, are compatible to their previous generation CPU. So that means if maybe you were a data center player and you bought the 4th generation, you can just buy this 5th generation and kind of swap them out, maybe changing some BIOS, maybe changing some stuff here and there. But overall, it's a very, very quick change where you don't have to change a lot of the hardware. Where there are going to be companies, and we're going to see Intel, for example, their next generation chip that they announced is not compatible to their previous chip. So if a data center wants to kind of change, they have to change a lot of hardware from the motherboards, maybe even up to the memory, depending on the adaptability of that server CPU. So this is one of the great things about this 5th gen, is that it is compatible to the 4th gen solution. Now, if we take a closer look, AMD also shared a lot of numbers compared to the competitors. And here they are comparing it to Intel's previous generation. Before we go any further, we are now on the road to 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year. Thank you all for the crazy support. So if you haven't and are enjoying the content, make sure to hit the thumbs up and the subscribe button. Finally, if you want to support the channel a little bit more, make sure to check out my special offer at fool.com/Jose. Now back to today's episode. And they mentioned that, hey, look, our product is way faster than anything the competition has right now. In some scenarios, even 5.4 times faster. So obviously, and this is for AI solutions being done in the CPU market. There are certain talks that, hey, there's certain AI tasks that you are okay doing in a CPU opposed to a GPU, and this is what AMD is trying to showcase. And one of the things that also Intel mentions is that their CPU is the best for AI. And AMD here is trying to showcase that, hey, look, our product is actually way better than Intel's. And we continue to see here even more solutions where their 5th gen continues to dominate in certain workloads against Intel. There was also a conference that AMD attended. And in this conference, there was a little bit of discussion of server CPU, where AMD mentions that, hey, look, they reached 33% of revenue market share in the server CPU CPU market. They're also guiding for a quarter two to have a strong year-over-year double-digit growth, and sequentially, they do expect the server business to be up sequentially in quarter two. So we are seeing some nice momentum in the server CPU market. They also think that the second half, they are going to have some tailwinds that will help continue to drive server business to grow faster than the first half. So this was the first part of the episode, kind of taking a closer look at AMD solutions. Now I want to take a closer look at Intel solutions. So Intel, right now the stock is sitting at $30.45. Year to date, this is one of the few semiconductor stocks that is down. It's down over a third of its overall value. We can see down 36.3%, and from its 52-week high, the stock is down roughly 38%. I also recently did a video on Intel, and I mentioned in that video that I'm not too much of a fan of Intel, but if you are bullish in their manufacturing endeavors, that's where I believe this company will have the biggest growth in valuation if it succeeds. Now, that's a different question if it succeeds or not. But if it does succeed in the manufacturing, I think Intel is pretty cheap. Again, check out my videos of the last week where I took a closer look at Intel's AI solutions and my overall thoughts on valuations. So Intel, opposed to AMD, I believe this one has a little bit more risk to reward, where obviously it can be dead money for some time, but if it does execute correctly, I believe this could be a major winner. So Intel did announce their next generation server CPU. And while AMD calls their server CPUs EPYC, Intel calls their server CPU Xeon. And this new Xeon is called Xeon 6. And in Xeon 6, they are releasing it in two varieties or two flavors. The first version is going to be called E-cores, and E-cores is called for efficiency. The second is going to be called P-cores. And Intel, right now, like I mentioned, Intel is doing a lot in its manufacturing push. And because it's doing a lot in its manufacturing push, it is able to develop its chips at a faster rate. For example, 6 months ago, they released their 5th generation, and now they're already releasing their 6th generation. So this might be seen as, I find this kind of interesting, right? Because if I was a customer of Intel, CPU market is not growing as fast as like the GPU market in forms of performance growth, right? So if I was a customer of Intel, I wouldn't really have purchased much of the 5th generation if I knew the 6th was coming out really soon. So Intel is releasing their 6th generation. That 6th generation, the first one, the E-core, is called Sierra Forest, and that's already shipping today. Then the P-core is expected to launch next quarter. And they talk about this kind of new E-core, and they mentioned that this provides up to 4.2 times performance over its 2nd generation Xeon processor. So this is where I find it kind of reiterates the statement that I just made, that the CPU market is not growing that fast. Where Intel, they're saying, hey, look, our product is 4 times better. If you look at our 2nd generation, we're on our 6th generation. What kind of company does that, where they say, hey, look, our product is so much better than something we had multi years ago? And it just showcases that the CPU market is not evolving at a rapid pace. Now, one thing that I mentioned that Intel unfortunately does not have with AMD is Intel's Xeon 6 processors are based on their new Intel 3 processing node or manufacturing node. So because of this, it is not compatible to their 5th generation. This is a new type of chipset, a new type of socket. So for companies to be able to use this one, they have to buy a lot more hardware. So there is a little bit more barrier to entry here for Intel compared to AMD, right? For AMD, you might just be like, hey, you just need to buy the new chip. We can keep a lot of the other stuff the same. For Intel, it's not the same. And I also believe that may be the reason why they compare it to a 2nd gen chip, where it's like, okay, if I have a 2nd gen chip, it makes more sense for me to upgrade my whole platform. Intel has also mentioned that a lot of their enterprise customers don't really update a CPU until 5 years later. So 5 years ago was kind of the Gen 2 product, give or take. So that's another reason why I'm giving it the benefit of the doubt of why Intel was comparing it to the second product instead, to the second gen product opposed to their fifth gen product in general. Now, like I mentioned, Intel is also pushing in the manufacturing push, right? In the manufacturing endeavors. And because it's doing the manufacturing endeavor, it has to showcase that it can do the manufacturing really well. And unfortunately, if it doesn't have many customers doing Intel 3, or if it doesn't have any customers doing Intel 3, the best way it can kind of showcase its manufacturing push is by using its own solutions and making its own chips using its own manufacturing process. So this is another reason I believe Intel is kind of fast forwarding into its generations, because it's going to say, hey, look, this is built on Intel 3. We do this in the manufacturing world. So if you are a semiconductor company that needs to build a chip, you can see from our own products, we do it really well. But right now, Intel, in my opinion, is one, trying to save its server CPU business, and at the same time is trying to build that manufacturing business, and is trying to do it both at the same time. So it's creating a lot of hecticness, in my opinion, in the short term. But like I believe in the future, if this manufacturing push goes well, Intel is definitely sitting at a very attractive price. Now, before I end this episode, Intel did fire back at AMD for providing kind of those benchmarks, right? Those benchmarks that I showcased earlier, where AMD believes that their fifth generation, that their new product is way better than Intel's fifth generation product. And Intel responded that right now, because Intel has faster memory, a larger last level cache, and more cores, 5th gen Intel Xeon processors deliver better AI performance than their previous generation, unmatched by any other CPU in the market. And they mentioned that, hey, look, at Computex 2024, AMD mentioned that their Turin, which is their upcoming generation CPU, they showed benchmarks against this 5th generation Xeon processors, but the results do not reflect achievable performance on 5th gen Intel Xeon processors with optimized open source software. AMD didn't share what kind of software they use to kind of benchmark Intel, but Intel showcased that, hey, look, if you use the optimized software available in the market right now, their 5th generation Xeon processor will outperform AMD's future CPU. So in theory, the 6th generation that they are come out with is going to be even better than AMD's upcoming CPU. So here, I thought this was pretty interesting. I'm not too happy to see this because this is not the first time we've seen something like this from AMD. AMD actually did something like this with Nvidia's AI GPUs. And maybe one time is okay, but now doing something like this 2 times is definitely kind of bringing, to some extent, maybe some negative taste in my mouth on how maybe management is dealing with competition at the moment. So I wouldn't hear from you, the viewers. How do you see this? So let me know in the comments below, what are your thoughts here? Am I overthinking how AMD is playing, or is AMD getting maybe a little bit too worried? Final thoughts. I already broke down what are my thoughts on valuations in forms of AMD and Intel. I believe AMD has a better probability of succeeding. I believe if Intel succeeds in its manufacturing, it has a better chance of giving better returns. So those are my overall thoughts. Take care, have a good day, and see you all next time.